Well, hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, get a friend to choose a story. I then commentate along to the episodes and try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each instalment is.
Hello, I'm Martin Geraghty and I'm one of the long-standing artists on the Doctor Who magazine comic strip, and more recently a member of the animation team on the Missing Episodes productions. Toby has very kindly asked me to contribute to his podcast, and the story I've chosen is The Horror of Fang from 1977, which is one of those base under siege stories that Doctor Who does so well. And it's very probably my most rewatched Doctor Who story, to be honest.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to this edition of Happy Times and Places, in which we all go down to the lighthouse to see where these 4 episodes of Doctor Who guide us. Martin Geraghty is our special guest. By a lovely coincidence, Doctor Who seems to enter into my life in all sorts of funny ways. And Martin actually doesn't, Martin, who is at the sort of creative hub of a lot of the animations that have been bringing Doctor Who missing episodes to life, and he lives only down the road from me. I've actually visited him at home to do a little bit of shooting for a little making of that we did for the Faceless Ones DVD to get some insight into his creative process, because he and Marie Walsh, who's the producer of a lot of the animations, and I all live in a sort of little triangle here in Manchester, just by a sort of strange and wonderful coincidence. I didn't know Anne-Marie lived here until I'd just done some work on Power of the Daleks, and then I was doing my gig on a Tuesday night. I think I must have mentioned Doctor Who on stage, and this lovely lady came up and said, "Oh, you mentioned Doctor Who?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, I've just worked on an animation for a thing called Power of the Daleks." I said, "Oh, I've just done some voice work for that," and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, so, and her and Martin came over here when we did the commentary for Sharda, which we did at the kitchen table not far away from where I'm sitting now. So Doctor Who all seems to sort of coalesce around me. I'm sure we all feel like that, because it's such a phenomenon, isn't it, that there's somebody who you always know somebody who knows somebody that has some sort of involvement. But it's nice when you feel at the centre of something that's important to you, even though you're not really. So, Horror of Fang Rock. I don't live next door to anybody who involved in it, but I have encountered some of its key creative contributors, as we will discover as we go through these 4, I think, marvellous episodes of Doctor Who. I think this one's going to be fairly straightforward for me to do. So, I'm on the BritBox. And I will just tell the robot lady to turn the volume down, but I'll cut that bit out so it doesn't do it for you at home. Alexa, volume 4. So, let us press play on Horror of Fang Rock in 3, 2, 1. I just have to check then. It's one of those blind spots I have. I know it's Horror of Fang Rock, but I thought for a second, is there a the? But there's no, it's not the Horror of Fang Rock. It's just, there's no the. It's one of the few Doctor Who stories. Oh, well, no, is it? I'm just thinking, Nightmare of Eden, Terror of the Zygons. But anyway, let's not get into how many Doctor Who stories have the as part of the title. Lovely, basic, simple model shot. Isn't it a super idea to set a Doctor Who story in a lighthouse? I mean, and not just to have that as the setting, but to have, the light and the electricity as a sort of thematic part of the story, which then bleeds into the characters, which also feeds into the modus operandi of the evil creature itself. All very, very artfully done. by Terence Dicks, a name obviously we're very used to seeing on the spines of books, but he didn't write that many TV scripts. Yes, we know he rewrote and script edited a lot and all of that, but actually as a writer of stories, not so many, and I still regret not using him as one of my 5 favourite things when we did the 5 Doctors, which was very daft of me. So I suspect I will be choosing Terence Dicks sooner rather than later, not just because this is a marvellous script. I've already mentioned the thematic stuff, but it's full of well-drawn characters. It's got some very, very witty lines. We know how funny Robert Holmes is. I think we sometimes forget how funny Terence Dicks is. But he totally understands what to do. And this is a funny one because it's not a Philip Hinchcliffe story, although it does feel a bit like it is. It's a sort of stylistic hangover from the previous era. And it was one of the first Target books I got myself. I had some book tokens, and it was one of the few ones that we hadn't got in the Castle bookshop. And there's a brilliant Jeff Cummings picture of Tom Baker, and it looks like he's got a sort of birthmark or something on his face, or a scar, but it's not. It's just because he's copied it very, very well from this photograph, and the shadowing on Tom Baker's cheek makes for a sort of prominent mark that I always think slightly strange looking, but it's just a quirk of sort of lighting and shadow. So here we have Ralph Watson and Colin Douglas. Colin Douglas, Donald Bruce from Enemy of the World. In his second Doctor Who story, I believe Paddy Russell basically phoned him up and said, "I've got a really hard, impossible part. Come and help me." And Douglas had not enjoyed or had not thought much of Enemy of the World. I seem to recall Deborah Watling saying that he spent the whole thing sort of going, "This is a load of old rubbish." But I'm not sure that was the case here. Everyone sort of seemed to like him on here. And Ralph, who's playing Ben, who in the book I think is a much bigger, burlier guy, a slightly different sort of character. Ralph knew Colin because I think they'd done a play together for about a year, something about miners, I think. And Ralph said that Colin always referred to his wife as the gin bucket, and Colin was a landlord. He had some flats in London, and a friend of mine recently shared digs with his son, but I didn't get any good stories because it was a sort of, this bloke I stayed with in Edinburgh, his dad was in Doctor Who. Anyway, he does a great job with what is a potentially quite a cliched part, but he's a consummate. He knows the business. Colin Douglas, he knows exactly what he's doing. Ralph Watson, I had the pleasure of watching Enemy of the World with Ralph Watson because Enemy and Webb, of course, came back together, and Ralph Watson is in the Web of Fear as Captain Knight. His parts get sort of smaller and smaller as his association with Doctor Who goes on, really, Ralph Watson. Well, I mean, he has a tiny little turn in The Underwater Menace. Wasn't even credited in cast list for that for many, many years, but he does get a credit on episode 4. He's a face on a screen, an overseer. But then he's Captain Knight, and he's also Etis in The Monster of Peladon, and then he's Ben in this, where he doesn't even make it past episode 1. Lovely film stuff here. Leela looks fabulous. Louise Jameson looks fabulous in this outfit. I love that coat of Tom Baker's. Lovely atmosphere of the sea noise. There's something so powerful about the inky blackness and the sheer power. I mean, I remember at quite a strange time in my life when I was touring my set, my Doctor Who scarf, just sitting on the coast at Lytham St Anne's and the sea crashing, and I had quite a sort of profound sort of experience of being considering the elements and feeling. I can understand why people feel sort of invigorated when they do sea walks, because the sheer force of nature is kind of bleeding into you, but also it brings and you're dwarfed by it. You are nothing compared to the ocean, and but it also brings with it, as well as the force, the sheer force that it has, unknowable depths and, perishing lethal cold and all sorts. John Abbott as Vince, absolutely wonderful performance. Potential to not be a great character, I think, because he's young and because he's naive, but he's so likable. But he does the innocence without it being cloying or annoying. In fact, I think Ralph Watson, and I knew Ralph a little bit, and he was a very nice man. And his story about being descended from a family of men, all of whom survived World War One, and how emotional that made him when he recalled the shame of, I think it was his grandmother, as the only woman in the village who hadn't suffered a casualty, and what that brought with it. I witnessed him tell that story a couple of times, found it desperately moving, and he was quite an emotional man. Ralph, he was a real sort of working class. Sort of working class hero. He was very aware of his working class history and the terrible things the miners had gone through. That he knew that generation of men and of people who knew real poverty and real hardship, and he was very conscious of that. And actually he got quite emotional about it. Which made him a fascinating conversationalist. I actually think this is his weakest performance in Doctor Who. It's a bit shrill. It's a bit what you do. I'm a bit, I don't know. I think expecting a sort of burly, gruff kind of Ben from the book. It's and no disrespect to Ralph, who I think's great, but I don't think it's his best performance. But this is great, isn't it? The mist means you don't have to see what's the coast in the distance. Although they have keyed that in the earlier scenes, they've keyed the view from the gallery, as it were, in very well. It's a very simple and effective production, and Terrence Dicks has given Reuben all that sort of I believe in all this sort of stuff, and it is quite cliched, but it's absolutely fine for this sort of thing. And when you've got good actors like Colin Douglas who know exactly how to pitch these sorts of characters, it's fine. I'm not a technician. That's very nice. And of course we're in Birmingham doing this. Yes, of course, Horror of Fang Rock is good. It was made in Birmingham, and I think the Doctor and Leela are marvellous in this, even though Tom Baker and Louise Jameson were not best of friends on this. I think that's well documented. And Tom did not get on particularly well with Paddy Russell, the director, because I think Tom was in a combative mood and Paddy didn't take no nonsense, and that was not a good. That was not a good mix. But it does mean we have a rather sort of maudlin, spiky Doctor. Although I like the way he shows respect to Vince. I like the fact they both. That's really nice, actually. They both sort of show Vince respect more, but because the mores of the society that means everybody else sort of patronises him and treats him like, because he's young and working class. But the Doctor and Leela don't read either of those things, so they just treat Vince with respect in a way that actually pretty much nobody else does. He's either patronised or treated, with as though he is a class inferior. And this is beautifully seeded in. Oh, we've brought up Ben. Oh no, we didn't see him. He's not there. No, we'd have seen him if he stepped out. Hang on. There's something wrong. Oh yeah, Mr. See, he calls him Mr. Hawkins. Adelaide later, doesn't she, calls him Hawkins, and Leela calls him Vince. And that's just so economical. But that says something about everybody in the way that they relate to Vince. And I love all this stuff of those, those big thick woolen jumpers. They were a thing. They were a thing that people had. Sort of multi-purpose sort of work jumpers, particularly associated with the sea. And I find that sort of comforting as a visual and as I can just imagine what it was like. Oh, is this where she starts to just take her clothes off? I think that's brilliant. I'm no lady. I think that's terrific. And his reaction is absolutely delightful. See, even though the story is, unfolding very gently, we don't see any other characters after, until the ship's crashed at the end of the episode, until the next episode. But you've got the disappearing Ben, the crackly thing, the thing that we know has fallen and is watching the lighthouse and the green light, and that's just a great shot, isn't it? It's just Tom Baker silhouetted in the door. But you've also got these wonderful dynamics that you need. I hadn't really thought of this as a base under siege, but of course it is. It's totally what it is. That's it to its core. And this particular base has a thing of the week. I did Fury from the Deep very recently. That was the gas base. You've got the London Underground base of the Web of Fear. Got the ice base of the Ice Warriors, and this one is the brand new electricity base, because the characters are getting used to electricity, and Ruben doesn't trust it. I always find trouble. I like the way he treats it as a kind of there's a sort of cynical, dark, a sardonic resignation. That's not to undermine what's happened. It's deadly serious, this, but he's not not going to drench it in sentimentality. It's this is the Doctor kind of he doesn't like all of this death, but he's not gonna greet it like we do, and that makes it really interesting. But also, it doesn't mean he's being glib or unkind about it. It's because he has this wonderful, lofty Olympian detachment, and he's taken that hat off the wall and has a different hat on this week, which I also adore. And Leela's got changed and looks great with the jumper, and she's so good. They're such a good team. Although the Doctor is daft, he risks getting knifed. And so we have the geography of it. So because it takes place in such a small space. Got the boiler room, the coal hole, the gallery up top, and the room in the middle. Oh, and yeah. But it means and Ben's lantern has been crushed, which suggests that whatever killed him was pretty powerful. And Colin Douglas is doing this so very well. He was still going when I was watching telly. He was in GBH, the Alan Bleasdale series, although he died by the time it was repeated, not that long after. And I believe had a bit of a hard time on it, and I think it sort of knocked the wind out of his sails on his final job, which is a shame because it's a nice part that he had, but I don't believe it was the happiest experience for him, which is a shame because he was an actor of great experience and great solid dependability, good proper character actor, and he gives Ruben is the old one full of foreboding and old wives' tales, but he's got the way that he treats Vince. He does with a certain sort of gentle. He's firm but fair, but he also gives him a sort of gentleness. Although he also does. He treats him with a gentleness and tries to reassure him, but also says, "But I'm not going to spare you the old supernatural tales." And we never quite get to the bottom of what the Beast of Fang Rock is. So Terence has his cake and then sort of forgets that we've eaten it with the Beast of Fang Rock, because there's no sort of and something crashed here hundreds of years ago. It's just like that load of old nonsense just happens to be a happy coincidence for the telling of this particular story. And I like the Doctor's line of, but the you know how to operate it. The Doctor sort of slightly go, you sour old puss. Yeah, see, all of this is loaded with stuff. The Doctor is sort of amused by Ruben's sort of predictable small-mindedness in terms of he thinks that Leela is a foreigner, and they're having, and it's great because these, as we know, Tom and Louise weren't getting on, but they have they are bonded here by their sort of detached amusement from Ruben. Although again, Douglas does it with enough sort of dignity that you kind of see where he's coming from. You know, he wants to do things proper, and he's a man of God and all that sort of thing. And they're not being too cruel to him. But the Doctor, the Doctor does have that line, doesn't he, about what was he like before gas? He was probably saying there's nothing better than a good old fashioned candle. He's Ruben is one of those people that will reject anything that is new almost for the sake of cantankerousness, and we all know people like that too. Will find fault in everything, and when you point out the fault in their thing, they'll go, "Oh yeah, but probably this anyway." So it's really nice characterization. Although Ruben is a type that Dix is clever enough to know how to deploy what he does and how people react to him in a way that is, hugely entertaining. Whilst, we're building up the tension of what the hell is going on in this lighthouse, and there's an explanation, isn't there, for the fog as well, which is brilliant because it means you have that beautiful atmospheric sort of surrounding. And the fog, I was so scared of the film The Fog when I was a boy, and that's got a lighthouse in it as well, and that was the most terrifying thing as a young boy. And I remember at about 1 o'clock in the morning, a policeman once knocked on our window with a torch, and it was foggy, and it was like Blake from The Fog, because I think he'd got my brother's passport or something that they'd had for some reason. So he thought on his way past he'd drop it off, and you just go. I was up late, but I did stay up late watching movies and stuff like that. But it's a good job I was a strong-hearted youth, because it was a bit terrifying. I remember my mum being not impressed at a policeman knocking on our window on a foggy night, shining a torch through it at 1 o'clock in the morning. Those things happen when you live in the country. So only one little bit of filming for this story, and it's this stuff. And it's very effective. It's a very well rendered set, which would look probably a bit pony on videotape, because you'd be able to see that it's not really rocks. It's dressed frames or whatever it is. Is it maybe a bit of carved polystyrene or whatever? But it looks like rock because film is beautiful. Dead fish, they could look a bit less plastic, but any holes picked in this story will be very minor, because I think it's a pretty much perfect Doctor Who story for me. Horror of Fang Rock. I think all of the ingredients that I like about good Doctor Who: scary, funny, intelligent, good, well characterized, well directed, simple, brilliantly simple, well acted. It's got all of it. It's got all of that. And I'm a sucker for you're watching something with characters that you get to know and like, and they get sort of picked off one by one, And Tom Baker has a wonderful brooding quality that is perfect for this kind of story, particularly when he's in this mood. And John Abbott, I think, is older than the character that he's playing. He said he always played rather younger than he was. I think he's 32 or something in this. I've never had the pleasure, actually. which is a shame because I do like it as a performance. I think he retired from acting after he'd done 4 Weddings and a Funeral, in which he's a clergyman at the end who catches Hugh Grant swearing a lot, I think. But I think it's a superb performance. I think he's lovely as Vince. I got very annoyed by the DVD menu of this, which basically shows everyone getting killed. The whole thing about a story like this is what's going to happen to my favourite character, or is my least favourite character going to get their just desserts in a thematically appropriate manner or whatever. And if you didn't know the story and you put the disc in, by the time had the gumption to press play all, you'd know pretty much what happened to everybody. And I think those sorts of things, when they happen, you go, do people not think for a second? And in the great scheme of things, it's not terribly important. So, of course, I get absolutely livid about it. Anyway, but that's a nice little touch. It doesn't come across quite as well in the story because we don't see any of it. But the idea that the dead is walking and all of that, and it's because it's dragged Ben off, hasn't it, to do a sort of post-mortem so that it can understand how we work, which is a lovely, lovely idea. Which doesn't quite come across as well as it might, I think, in this. But it's a lovely idea in the script, the sort of, and of course, because we're set slightly in the past, everyone can afford to be a little bit superstitious. I remember this being a thing that when I first saw it, because every Doctor Who story has to have something that's a little bit disappointing. And this is not the best model in the world, which means that this cliffhanger is a little bit substandard because, well, we don't really know what's going on the boat anyway, and it's clearly an FX boat. But the mixture of the sound, the way that the cliffhanger is composed in that sense, and the light and the Doctor firing the flare and the sound and the horn, that is all really nicely done. It's just a shame it's not the best model in the world. I'd forgotten that. I was coming into this going, it's Horror of Fang Rock. It's simply one of the best Doctor Who stories ever. I know the monster's a bit naff at the end, but other than that, I'd forgotten. Yes, there's not a great model shot of the boat. However, this is going to be John Walker. Oh, he was an assistant cameraman on The Abominable Snowmen, so I've had the pleasure of zooming with him relatively recently. Paul Allen designed The Seeds of Death, I think he is no longer with us, and Spearhead from Space. And Paddy, I have some stories I can tell you about Paddy. I have various bits and bobs of hers upstairs because her brother let me have all of her telly files. She hadn't kept much, and most of it was stuff that she'd put together after the event. But anyway, yes, so there's been Paddy's cat litter tray is upstairs. I'm sure I probably mentioned that during Pyramids of Mars, but what a terrific director. And twice gets great performances out of Tom Baker, whether he it might have meant that he was pissed off or she was pissed off, but it doesn't matter. The end result is what is endured. I've got my favourite thing, I think, has got to be that it's a Terrance Dicks script. Terrance Dicks, I think, is a name we take so for granted because it's on the side of books and because we really know he was an excellent script editor who had a great relationship with his producer Barry Letts, and aside from that, he's Terrance Dicks. He's Uncle Terrance. He's all monsters are green, and just a wonderful, ubiquitous presence at conventions, who said what he thought. John Nathan Turner couldn't sell whelks. But who was also very kind and very game and obviously very fond of Doctor Who, and very humble about his own contribution. It was all, we just wanted to get the test card. We just wanted to make sure the test card wasn't shown. A legend. But he's not just a legend because of what he became after he left, working on the program and the Terrance that we all know and love. This was a guy who could have a script about vampires that he was going to be doing, and be told, no, do something else, set it in a lighthouse, do it by yesterday, and can come up with this, which is economical, which is funny, which is scary, which, as I say, not only is it, yeah, all right, it's a base under siege, but there's thought gone into it in terms of set it in a lighthouse. What's a lighthouse? Electricity. Well, let's set it at a time when electricity is new, because electricity is actually dangerous. Well, what about having a monster that electrocutes people as well then? And actually, let's think of a way that, as we will see later, that the light of the lighthouse can be the source of the victory. Oh, but how would I do that? Well, I'd concentrate a light with diamonds. Well, why would I have diamonds? Oh, well, let's create these characters. I mean, if he did write it very quickly, what a brain he has to piece all of that stuff together so it all fits. Everything is apt. All of the characters are very nicely written. They're all gifts for actors. And there's beautiful moments, the dragging of the corpse, the post-mortem, the fact that fog is generated and cold is generated in order for the creature to prosper camouflage itself in the environment. All of that is sober, and there's some brilliant lines, as we will see. Leela's one about, I will cut out your heart, gentlemen. This lighthouse is under attack, and by morning we might all be dead. Anyone interested? I mean, the cliffhanger to episode 3 is beautifully written. So my thing for episode 1, because it might be that Martin chooses this later, but I will have it in the bank, so I will get the points. I'm choosing the fact that this is a Terence Dicks script. What is Martin choosing?
So, to begin with, here is my favourite part of episode 1. More so than the inspired setting of a lighthouse for the action, to set the action in, there's a brief but brilliant textbook example of show don't tell halfway through the episode from writer Terence Dicks, where the Doctor, in a wonderfully moody turn from Tom, responds to Leela's suggestion that they hunt the unknown killer by simply tapping the mangled brass oil lamp they've found and saying, I don't fancy playing tag in the fog with something that can do that. As an exercise in economical scripting and setting an 8-year-old's imagination racing, it's pretty difficult to beat. In one sentence, he absolutely nails the threat that everyone is facing on the island. And it's brilliantly done.
Well, yes. I mean, I'll leave that out there for you to say whether I get a point for that. I mean, I was being more general, but that's partially because I feel guilt at not choosing Terence for the 5 Doctors, who's staring me in the face. I chose the Castellan, for God's sake, not Terence Dicks. What an idiot! Somebody else should be doing this. What Martin used was an example of Terence at his very, very best. But I didn't choose that particular moment, and I didn't even cite that moment in my justification for choosing Terence in his script. But that is an excellent moment, and just isn't that brilliant? He'll go down, he'll have an oil lamp with him. How can I use that prop now to help to add to the menace, tell the story, give our characters something to talk, well, let's just have it crushed. There we go. That tells you so much. As Marty says, it's very much a show don't tell. It's brilliant and economical. It's the economics of it. It's when I was rewatching a lot of Russell T Davies stuff during the pandemic, it's the fact that he can say so much in a line, 2 or 3 lines. And when I've written scripts, you go, that scene, I've re-emphasized that over and over again in order that the audience don't miss the point. And and that's why this scene is 3 pages long, and it takes a better writer than me to be able to go cut through all of that and say that in 3 lines. That's the elegance, that's the beauty, that's the skill, the economy, and to trust the audience and to let the actors fill in the blanks as well with their sense of foreboding, with their fear, and with their moody, what does Martin said, a terrifically moody turn from Tom Baker, and it really is. You're not writing prose, you're writing something where the actors and the director and the situation can fill in the blanks. And Terence Dicks knew that. My God, he knew it. So, do I get a point for that? It's up to you. It's up to you, people. I hope you're enjoying Horror of Fang Rock as much as I am. I will continue to eulogize the story because it's one. I watched this for pleasure. I was going to say recently. It was actually last Christmas when I had a couple of weeks off doing podcasting and all sorts of other things. And this was one of the stories. I knew I'd got it coming up for with Martin with Happy Times and Places, but I wanted to watch a story for pleasure, and I watched this for pleasure. And I almost feel like watching it for pleasure, having just watched it and talked through it, because I think there's so much to savour and enjoy. And even the sort of boring, tedious scene setting, character establishment stuff is all done with such elegance, such economy, such wit. Oh, he was a witty man. And it's that sets Doctor Who aside often from so many programmes. And it's making the wit complement the action, not be sort of askance at the very programme it is in, not breaking the fourth wall, not being a moment where the act's having fun. It's a mordant wit that springs from the situation, and that is given to us by the fact that the Doctor has this sort of lofty Olympian detachment where he can be sort of sardonic and playful, but without the other characters losing their dignity. Because everyone, I think, even though everyone, has moments in this where they're set up to be sort of laughed at, they're still true to themselves because of the writing and because of the playing. I think it's really brilliantly done. It's a story that sums up everything I sort of love about Doctor Who, and will be a story I will always go back to. And I'm going to thoroughly enjoy watching and hopefully conveying my enthusiasm to you. It shines like a beacon. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Martin Geraghty, whose work you can see in Doctor Who magazine and on the Doctor Who animated DVD range. I'm grateful to Martin and to the many patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Joel Ahrens, Joanne Abbott, Keith Adams, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Neil Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Auriza, Radit Aritza, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, Richard Baker, Stephen Bamford, Simon Barker, Ollie Barrett, Andy Benison, Richard Bignell, Peter Blackett, Robin Bland, Gareth Bowley, David Brody, Hugh Bookman, Tim Burrows, Paul Carrington, Anthony Carroll, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Dave Churchill, Kevin Clark, not that one, Mark Clues, Graham Cluley, Charles Coffin, Simon Coling, Paul Conaghy and Ben Cook. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of people, you can do so by signing up for as little as £3 per month, for which you get 3 releases per week, and they are, well in advance of what the non-patron public get, so 6 months ahead for the Happy Times and Places. So if you're listening to Horror of Fang Rock now, well, the patrons, they're probably listening to the story I've just made up that hasn't even been on telly yet. No, probably not, but it'll be something else that you won't get to listen to for another 6 months. A month ahead are the Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic podcasts. Well, maybe they're actually 2 months ahead now. And there's also Too Much Information, Far Too Much Information, which is a podcast exclusive to patrons. So all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. The lowest tier is £3. That gets you most things. There are little trinkets that lure you further up the Patreon ladder, but not much. I don't really like holding anything away from anybody that's parting with their hard-earned cash. So most stuff, all the essential stuff, is available at the £3 a month tier, and you even get 10% off that if you sign up for a year in advance. I totally understand if you do not want to make a monthly commitment. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Haydock in order to sort of throw not metaphorical money, actual money, into a metaphorical hat. Buy me a metaphorical character. So it's all metaphor, apart from the actual handing over of money, which is all too real. But you can do it at any size and any denomination if you think you've particularly enjoyed a podcast this week, or if I sound particularly wan and hungry, or if you've just won the lottery. Whatever, you have your own reasons. You don't have to give them, but you can give what you want at kofi.com/Toby Haydock. This sort of financial stuff, it does help to me to justify the time given to getting these out on a regular basis, and it keeps these offerings ad-free, so I don't break off and go, do you know what I really love about this new thing that I wouldn't have actually been bothering to try unless they'd given me money to then have a contrived monologue that sounds so insincere about how I actually really love this thing that I otherwise wouldn't have touched with a barge pole. I love it, and you will too. Isn't that a happy coincidence for all of us? I'm not doing any of that stuff, but that is because, fortunately, there are people contributing to Patreon and to Ko-fi, which, as I say, enables me to give the time that may well be better spent doing other things, but I've decided to spend it doing these, and you've helped me to do so. So thank you. Now, in these difficult financial times, the last thing anybody wants to do is be throwing money around, but what you can throw around for absolutely free is compliments. Yes, indeed. 5-star flavoured ones at any outlet where you get your podcasts. A 5-star review really helps these to stand out amongst the crowd. If they stand out amongst the crowd, and the Doctor Who crowd is a big one, and it's full of very interesting people. So if you like this one and you would like it to stand out, please 5 stars and a couple of lines of review, just to let any passing trade know what they might be in for. If the stuff that you like about these, that time would be well spent for me and would be very, very gratefully received. So if you could do that, it costs you nothing financially, and is really beneficial and helpful. These podcasts have their own Twitter feed at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on at Toby Haydock, and you can also follow my comedy club XS Malarkey at XS Malarkey, and that's at 8 p.m. Every Tuesday in the fair city of Manchester. I was going to watch all of Horror Fang Rock tonight, but I've been suffering a bit from the flu, it's flu. I've been coughing and a bit done, but I'm still a little bit tired. So I want to do this one well. So I'm gonna duck out and see what is on Netflix or BritBox or whatever. I've been watching some old stuff. I watched The Incredible Robert Baldick today, which, if you haven't seen, is a sort of pilot, a Terry Nation written pilot for a sort of period adventurer, inventor, played by Robert Hardy, and it's got the most amazing opening with 2 guest characters actually played by two mighty character actors who never did Doctor Who, James Cossins and Reginald Marsh. Why the hell were neither of them in Doctor Who? But they're brilliant in this, and they, as I say, they're the sort of guest actors, because the regulars are Robert Hardy, Julian Holloway, and John Rhys Davis. And it's a lovely piece of telly. Really enjoyed it. I've watched the first 20 minutes or so of it 2 or 3 times, and then always got distracted, and then the disc I had broken. So I know. But anyway, I've got a new one, and watched it for the first time throughout today, and it's a really nice piece of work. But I won't be watching that tonight. Now I think I need something to wash over me a little bit. But that is between me and my, I'm going to say sick bed, my convalescent sofa. But hopefully I'll be in fine fettle to have the requisite energy to gallop through the next 3 episodes of Horror Fang Rock, because it's a goodie. But anyway, wishing you well, and yes, sorry for the tiredness and the slightly dusty lungs, but hopefully will. You feel your age as you get older, and things I would have shaken off within a day or 2 just linger a little bit longer. Starting to feel my age. Anyway, off I go.